I'm going to try to explain to you what's been happening in Palestine. We're going to start first with what happened in Jenin, in the Jenin refugee camp, and then what happened in Jerusalem the next day. So the Israelis basically, as you guys know, they've been storming and raiding Jenin refugee camp for the better part of a year now, right? And they famously they killed Shireen Abu Akleh, who worked as a journalist at Al Jazeera while she was covering these raids. And on January 26th, the Israelis stormed Jenin and killed 9 Palestinians, right? And among them was a 61-year-old woman and a male civilian. I believe he was a teenager. I'm not sure. But here are the dead. And actually, a 10th person died from his wounds about 2 days later, right? So in total, it's 10 Palestinians killed, 20 Palestinians wounded. You know, as a result, the PA, so Palestinian Authority, they said they're cutting security cooperation with the Israelis, and you know, as usual, the Israelis go in and say, oh, they're looking for terrorists, right? It's the same excuse, right? This is a Dutch Palestinian filmmaker describing what happened. He said he was stuck in the middle of the firefight for hours, and that it was crazy. There were snipers and drones. They used a bulldozer to block off a street. I read there was from the hospital when they were bringing in all the dead and the wounded, written in Arabic, what each person had died from. You know, and one of them had a crushed skull. So I believe it was a teenage boy. He had his skull crushed by an Israeli vehicle. And of course, the Israelis, you know, they even block the ambulances from picking up the wounded. Like here, I mean, this is really, it's something they do so often, right? I'm not even surprised. But here's a video of this happening, you know, on January 26th. Yeah, business as usual. This is business as usual. So here's, by the way, here's Jenin refugee camp. You can see it's in the West Bank to the north. Yeah, just so you can get an idea here. Yeah. So this raid on January 26th, highest death toll in a single operation ever recorded by the UN since they began their records in 2005. You know, it's so disgusting. It's so disgusting. They even fired tear gas at a hospital. I have the video for you here. And then, of course, you know, they try and deny it and say, oh, it's not true. But the video speaks for itself. You know, the funny thing is, if you look this up on Google, you're going to find things that like this that happened in Gaza or happened before in the West Bank, because it's happened so often. You'll find the same exact headline, but multiple times, because it's just business as usual, right? Even if there's video evidence, they say, oh, it's not true. And of course, there are no Israeli casualties, right? So they massacre a refugee camp and suffer no casualties, but they're the victims. I want to show you just some scenes very quickly from the funeral processions. Here's some pictures. I mean, this is really big. You have to understand, the whole Palestinian nation, they immediately went on general strike. You understand? That's how big it is. Immediately, right? 3 days of mourning, everything. It's horrific, you know, it's horrific. And I just want to give you some more context this year alone. So, it's January 30th, right? January 31st. So it's barely been 4 weeks that we're in 2023, and they've already killed 32 Palestinians. If you look at the year before, 2022, 170 Palestinians killed in these raids. And of course, many of them are civilians, right? I want to show you also, this is a statement put out by the youth, the Jenin Theater, which is pretty famous there because it's a very popular cultural spot and youth spot. And I just want to read you a few lines here, okay, from the Freedom Theater. So this is from a producer, right? His name is Mustafa Shetta. He's a producer at the Freedom Theater. He said, early this morning, I went to the Freedom Theater. Students passed on their way to school and the laborers to work. We try to start our day as if we are normal humans. Without warning, the merciless Israeli military forces attacked Jenin refugee camp once again. to enact their brutal actions of killing, demolition, and arrests. The result was the murder of 9 people from the camp. It's actually 10, right? Including an elderly woman and a 24-year-old boy. Ambulances were prevented from reaching the many others injured, including at least 4 critically wounded. Jenin Youth Center has been destroyed, as has the monument to the martyr Dawood Zubaydi. And once again, the camp's children have had their mental health violated. You know, it's so disgusting, because I'm gonna tell you what happened in Jerusalem the next day, and you can see the contrast in how you know, the media talk about this and talk about what happened in Jerusalem. Because when the victims are Palestinian, it's like, whatever, you know. Oh, it's you know, they don't say it was a massacre. No, it was a raid, and they try to minimize it. You know, they try to like make it seem it's not as bad as it is. Here's what happened the next day in Jerusalem. 7 Israelis killed and 3 wounded in a shooting in occupied East Jerusalem. So this is Friday on January 27th, the next day. So the shooter was a 21-year-old Palestinian resident of East Jerusalem. He was shot dead. His name is Khairi Alqam, and he acted alone, right? So this is important. And they tried to frame it as he shot up a synagogue. Like they said, he went to a synagogue where people were praying, and he opened fire there. And it's just not true. This happened in Niv Yaakov, which is an Israeli settlement, an illegal settlement in East Jerusalem. And there happens to be a synagogue on that street. He didn't go into a synagogue and attack Jews, because they want to make you think like, oh, you know, all these Palestinians, they're raised from when they're babies to just hate Jews or something. Yeah, this is like this ridiculous, oh, they're all anti-Semites. That's nonsense. That's not what happened, and it's not true. So, and it's very important why you understand we're talking about East Jerusalem and that he acted alone, okay? Because usually they'll say, oh, well, you know, he's with Hamas, or he's with PIJ, or, you know, Islamic Jihad, or he's this and that, and they can't do it this time. So, you know, as a result of this, by the way, just here, as I say, Israeli settlers moved to Niv Yaakov following the occupation of the city by Israel in 1967. Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are considered illegal under international law. So, you know, when they're saying that he shot civilians, number one, it is illegal for Israeli civilians to be in there in the first place. This is very clear in the Geneva Convention, in the 4th Geneva Convention. The occupying power, meaning Israel, is forbidden from moving its own population into the territory it controls. So if anyone is to blame, first of all, it's Israel, because they invaded it, they're occupying it since 1967, and they are putting their own civilians in harm's way. Now, when we say civilians, you have to once again remember we're talking about settlers. Okay, so when you talk about settlers in Israel, I mean, the guns are very important. They have, you know, easy access to guns, and this is relevant to what happened, because now you know, Netanyahu is back, and he's put this scumbag Ben Gvir as his minister of security, and as a result of this, they're now trying to make it easier for Israelis to get gun licenses. Okay, so basically turn it into even more of a Wild West. And one of their other plans, I'll show you here. This is, you know, this is their reaction to all this. Yeah, they're saying that in addition to making it easier for Israeli citizens to obtain weapons permits, on top of that, they're saying that if there's someone who carries out an act of resistance, terrorist, as they say, they're going to punish their whole family, right? And in this case, they have arrested 42 people, including family members. So it's incredible. In the previous sentence, they're telling you Alqam Khairi is believed to have acted alone, and then in the next sentence, they tell you that the Israelis arrested 42 people. Hold on a second. If he acted alone, what do these 42 people and his family members have any, you know, what do they have to do with it? This is collective punishment. This is what is known as collective punishment. And this is, once again, this is illegal under international law. Per the Geneva Convention is very, very clear. You can't punish everybody because one person did something that you don't like. Okay? And again, you know, when they talk about this is terrorism. I just told you the Israelis have no right to be in East Jerusalem in the first place. When the Ukrainians are shooting Russians inside of Ukraine, no one says, oh, well, they're shooters. No, they say, oh, they're liberating their homeland. I can point you to a brilliant piece that Stanley Cohen, who's a very great friend, and he's been on the show many times, that he wrote for Al Jazeera a few years back, and it's called Palestinians Have a Legal Right to Armed Struggle. And he goes through and he's an attorney, right? And he goes through all the international treaties and conventions that clearly say that, if you are living under occupation, you have every right under the sun to take up arms and liberate your country. It's very, very clear. It's not my opinion. It's not anybody's opinion. It's the law. The law is very clear. So, they're trying to frame him as a terrorist, and it doesn't work. And then, not even 24 hours later, there's a 13-year-old Palestinian who shot 2 Israelis, also in Jerusalem. And do you see the pattern here that these guys are all acting alone? And if you look at the last couple of years, you'll have other guys that I covered here, other incidents that I covered here on the channel of young Palestinian men who are going out on their own, and they're committing or carrying out acts of resistance. And they don't belong to any group. They're not with Hamas. They're not with Fatah. They're not with PIJ. They're not with any political party. They're just doing this. Why are they doing this? What do they all have in common? They live under occupation. That's what they have in common. They are sick of living under the boot of Israel and the United States. And this shows you that there's a human instinct for, that you fight for your country, you fight for dignity, and you fight for, to liberate your homeland. And you can't, the Israelis, they think that, oh, well, now we're going to punish their family members and we're going to confiscate their homes. That's another one I haven't told you about. That's another one of their new ideas. And we're going to give settlers guns. They think that this is going to fix the problem. It's not going to fix the problem, because you can't take away the instinct for survival and freedom from within each Palestinian. You can't do that. You can't do that. It doesn't matter, what measures you take. And you can't say, oh, well, they're terrorists and they're this and that. No. Not at all. And here's another thing that I just mentioned. They're also now going to make it easier to confiscate people's homes. So here's a video of the Israelis. They literally sealed off Khairi Alqam's home, right? Like with welders and everything, huh? It's not a joke. So, if you resist the Israelis, they're going to take away your family home. They're going to arrest your family members. They're going to take away your family's social security, and they're going to even deport you. Like if you have the privilege of living as what they call an Arab Israeli, which is like basically you're a 5th-class citizen, inside of Israel, then they will deport you from Israel, right? You're a Palestinian. You've been here for, God knows how many generations. Oh, they're gonna deport your whole family, right? I mean, it's incredible, right? Just straight up collective punishment. There's no way around it. I mean, even in the Guardian, they say that all of this is illegal, right? All of these measures are illegal under international law. And again, here we can list them. Stripping family members of attackers of social security and health benefits, making it easier to demolish homes of Palestinians, strengthening settlements. Basically, they're using this as an excuse to build more illegal settlements in the West Bank, which has nothing to do with it. Like literally nothing. It's not even in the same place. And here, this is a good example of the difference, right? I told you how just the day before you had 10 Palestinians killed and 20 wounded. They speak so differently in the media and the Western officials, because when Israelis are being killed, oh, it's a horror. But when Palestinians are being killed, well, they must have had a good reason to do it, right? Because those are just terrorists or something. And I want you to grasp the difference here, because, these are young men who are acting on their own. The Israelis are a member of the Israel is a member of the United Nations, right? They say they're the Jewish state, like they claim to speak for all Jews worldwide. So this is a state, right? A so-called state sending its official armed forces into a refugee camp and mowing people down, versus young men who are acting on their own, who are living under occupation and have the legal right to do this stuff. The difference, I mean, it couldn't be starker. It just couldn't be. Here's Blinken, right? So U.S. Secretary of State, he says our thoughts are with the Israeli people following the terrorist attack in Jerusalem. No, it's not a terrorist attack. A terrorist attack is something like 9/11. Yeah, a Palestinian resisting in East Jerusalem, which is illegally occupied, against the occupiers, is not terrorism. You can try and call it whatever you want. It's just not. And this is under a strict legal sense, never mind moral sense. But anyway, I'm going to read you his statement. He says that it is particularly tragic on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Again, this has nothing to do with the Holocaust. This is a pure coincidence, but they want to make it seem like, oh, the Arabs, they just hate Jews for some reason. And he says we condemn this attack, right? So it's very clear language. We condemn this and express our condolences to the victims' families. May their memory be a blessing. Fine. Where's your compassion for the 10 Palestinians who were killed the day before? There's nothing, man. You can go look up his Twitter. There's nothing there. You can go look up the State Department's website. There's nothing there. They don't care, and this is why am I pointing this out? Because he's literally in the region. He just visited Egypt, and he just visited the Palestinians and the Israelis today. Literally a few hours ago, he's shaking hands with Netanyahu. So it matters, right? It matters, and you can see how not just with Blinken, but the media in general, they don't accord the same importance to victims. And I want to show you this. This is an interesting clip I literally found an hour ago. This is so these are two female settler witnesses to the shooting, okay? And they're talking to the media here in Hebrew. And so the tweet here says she implored Khayri not to kill her when he approached her, and he replied to her in Hebrew, not Arabic, in Hebrew, "We do not kill women," and continued on his way.
והוא המשיך, באותו רגע הבנתי שהוא בעברית. הוא אמר לה, אני לא יורה בבנות.
I can almost understand what she's saying because Hebrew and Arabic are Semitic languages. She said banot, and in Arabic banat is girls or women. So I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what she said. I saw this also translated in on other accounts, but I just pulled this one up because the caption was in English. So, I will say one thing though. I think among the 7 settlers, one of them was a woman. There was a married couple. So I don't know, how she got killed, but he didn't kill them. But anyway, I just found this interesting. And I wanted to show you here the reaction from Israeli settlers because, I told you the Israeli cabinet, Netanyahu's cabinet, what they're doing, giving more guns to settlers. Within 24 hours after what happened in Jerusalem, you had 144 settler attacks against Palestinians. This is from Washington Post, okay? And they're quoting Wafa, which is a Palestinian news agency. I mean, we're talking about minor rock throwing to much more violent. And I have some pictures for you here. Like they're torching people's cars, right? You have a couple of Palestinians who were shot dead also. So just so you understand, here also, just so you understand that when we talk about Israeli settlers, they do this kind of stuff, right? So in addition to occupying the land, which is illegal, they're also attacking the Palestinians in any way imaginable, and this is happening every goddamn day. But this was particularly egregious because I don't know if you've ever had that many attacks in a single day. So you can see how there's like this extrajudicial punishment of random Palestinians, and then they turn around and say, oh well, it's a democracy, and it's so disconnected from reality. And I want to go back to Khayri. So he's the guy who carried out the operation. Now this is very interesting because apparently his own grandfather was killed by an Israeli settler a few years ago. His grandfather, right? So in 2010, Ben Gvir, that's the guy on the left. So he's now the security minister, right? In 2010, Ben Gvir was the attorney of Perlman, this guy over here in the center, and Perlman was arrested on suspicion of murdering Khairi Alqam, but he was never charged. Here we go. Khairi Alqam, who's named after his grandfather, he's the one who killed the 7 Israelis. And now this guy on the left is the Minister of National Security. I mean, it's kind of like a weird small world, right? How these individuals are connected. And I don't know if it's revenge for, the murder of his grandfather, or he just got sick of living under occupation. I don't know what it is. But I thought it's interesting to mention this. Okay, this is from Daniel Levy. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he used to be a negotiator for Israel, but now he's speaking about the occupation. And I just want to play you a little bit of what he was saying.
If Europe is serious about Article 2 of its own treaty regarding human rights, if it wants to be taken seriously by the rest of the world as a normative actor standing for international law, for a rules-based international order, if it wants to have traction in that respect with much of the rest of the world that looks at the position on Ukraine and then looks at the position elsewhere and sees the Palestine-Israel situation as Exhibit A in double standards, if it wants to have that traction and win over the middle ground in the global south, then it has to act with consistency on a most egregious violation of international law. Let us be very clear, the situation is grave. The violations of Palestinian basic rights, human rights of international law take place every day. There is a permanent occupation and dispossession of Palestinians. There is structural inequality within Israel, and it is all well documented. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have come to a point where they have made a designation that a regime of apartheid prevails vis-à-vis Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. It's bad, and it gets worse. Impunity is the handmaiden to extremism. All of what we see is possible because the country acting in violation of international law is not held accountable. And therefore there is a choice for Europe, for this body. And the choice is whether to insulate its bilateral relations with Israel from Israel's illegal actions, or whether those are placed front and center of that bilateral relationship. Obviously, the path that has been chosen is the former. That leads to complicity in these human rights violations, and that means that Europe, unfortunately, has no standing in advancing peace or deoccupation.
Right, and that's a very important point, because I'm gonna say this again. All these young men, they have nothing to do with each other. They don't have a political ideology. The only thing they have in common is they're living under occupation. And you can't fight that unless you stop the occupation. It's the only solution. I want to show you a video here. This is after the massacre in Jenin. Look what he says in the video. So this is Fatah's secretary in Jenin, right? And he says, we in Fatah, Hamas, and PIJ are fighting in Jenin together as one hand. And this is very important because these groups have have varying ideologies, right? Political, religious, and it's very interesting because in the last years, you're seeing all of this resistance axis become stronger and more unified. So everything Israel is claiming it's trying to do, wow, we're going to go into Jenin and we're going to find all these quote unquote terrorists from PIJ. It's literally having the opposite effect. It's uniting everyone who is sick of the occupation, who supports the Palestinians even more, even if they don't have the same ideologies and positions, right?
اليوم نقاتل فتح وحماس وجهاد وجبهة شعبية وديمقراطية. كل شعبنا الفلسطيني في الميدان وكل هذا الجيل نقول للاحتلال إنهم فتية آمنوا بربهم وزدناهم هدى. ندعو جماهير شعبنا الفلسطيني إلى حمل السلاح. اليوم اللغة بيننا وبين الاحتلال هي لغة السلاح ولغة البندقية.
He's saying the only thing that the occupation understands is the language of violence, of the weapon, the sword. I mean, it's interesting because the Israelis, they want you to look at this picture here and tell you that these guys are terrorists. But when the Ukrainians are getting weapons, and not just machine guns, and assault rifles, they're getting tanks, and now they want jets. That's not terrorism. That's liberation. That's, it's resistance. There's no difference here. If anything, the Palestinians have a stronger case because they've been dealing with this shit for a long time. And before the Israelis was it was the British. So, you want to support, the Geneva Convention and all these various UN Security Council resolutions that also outline, right to armed struggle. You want to support people who are fighting to free their homeland. The first ones you look to is it's the Palestinians. Very, very, very simple. So I know they want to say this guy's a terrorist, but I'm sorry, legally the Israelis have no right to even be in East Jerusalem. None. They're illegally occupying it. That's not my opinion. You can go check out UN Resolution 242 and various other resolutions passed by the UN Security Council who said the same thing before I was even born. So and the right to armed struggle and everything. It's very, very clear. It's crystal clear. There's no way around it. The Israelis are the aggressors, and this idea that, we're going to seal off people's homes now and punish their family members is absolutely disgusting. And it shows you how much disregard they have for, their quote unquote democracy and international law. Like literally no respect whatsoever. None whatsoever. So that's what's happening. All right. That's what's happening in Jenin. That's what in the West Bank. That's what's happening in Jerusalem. The Israelis are escalating and they're just killing more and more and more and getting more emboldened. And, there's a lot of discussion about, is this going to lead to a third intifada, which is like basically uprising, because you've already had two intifadas in the past. The last one was in the early 2000s. I don't want to make any predictions because the situation is so bad. I'm thinking to myself, oh man, there's going to be a third intifada, and then they do something even worse. So they, I don't know where this is going, but I can tell you one thing. The whole world has access to the internet. They have phones now. They have computers. They can all see what's going on in Palestine. They can all see what Israel is doing. This is not going to work anymore to just call people who are Palestinian terrorists and claim that they have they harbor some hatred of Jews. This trick doesn't work anymore. Everyone can see through this. And they can see who the aggressor is and who the occupier is and who's the one, and who is fighting to free themselves. It's very, very crystal clear.